Killings never stop. It is one of the continuous disease in our society. These criminals nowadays become more violent and do heinous crime. With the police use lethal force, it helps to arrest perpetrator in the country. Lethal force is when police officers use lethal weapons to gain control of a situation. According to the Philippine National Police, is the primary law enforcement agency in the Philippines. It was established under Republic Act Number 6975 and is empowered by Section 24 to the use force in making arrest and investigation and prevention of crime. For that, lethal force is allowed to use for violent criminals.
You mentioned about the lethal force should be used to the violent criminals. Lethal force should not be used by the police to the violent criminals because we have a legal due process as based as in our human rights. As mentioned in Article 3, Bill of Rights, about the rights of every human that should not deprive of liberty. Therefore, even though one person guilty in committing such crime, we have always the legal process and not through this lethal force or deadly force. Lethal force should not be used by police according to RA 4864 or also known as Police Act of 1996 Section 7 that police officer shall be their duty to preserve peace and order, prevent commission of crimes, protect life, liberty, and property. Therefore, if the police officers use lethal force, this can cause death or serious physical injury, including the use of firearm, neck hold or strike to the head, neck, or throat with the hard object. In this case, if lethal force allowed and this shows that they abide their duty and responsibility as a police officer to simply preserve a peace and order. Therefore, lethal force must not be used by the police because if we allow this kind of operation to our police personnel, how about the human rights of this individual being affected of this action?
In that, we have our Miranda rights before arresting the perpetrator. And if they will fight back, the RA number 6975 Section 24 said that using force in making arrest and investigation of crime is allowed. And if the police will not use lethal force to arrest violent criminals, what is your alternative to make the perpetrator surrender properly?
We are going to use the current legal due process of the police. First, simply issuance of warrant of arrest to the criminal. In this lethal force is being avoided. Here we can apply the peaceful negotiation between police officer and perpetrator. Second, we have the search warrant where here the authorized police officer peacefully conduct search of the person, violent criminals. Also, they can enter and search premises and legal process than the police officer should not the one who begins any kinds of violence such as assault. However, in other case of the perpetrator begins an assault, then the police officer also has the right to defend themselves.
Under the revised penal code and the Philippine National Police Operation Procedure, allowed to use such force as would be necessary and reasonable to overcome resistance put up by the offender, subdue the clear imminent danger posed by him, or do justify the force or act under the principles of self-defense or defense of others. With the use of lethal force, it can be a self-defense of the police officer to the perpetrator who are violent to surrender properly and no one else be affected, especially if it is done in a public place.
You mentioned that with the use of lethal force, it can be a self-defense of the police and make the perpetrator surrender properly. We have no assurance that using lethal force can make the perpetrator surrender properly. As well as we have no assurance that no one else will be affected when using lethal force to the perpetrator will make it violent and affect the public places and safety. Like for example, the case of 3 slain in Sultan Kudarat shootout where 3 persons, the 2 of them are minors, killed in an alleged shootout with law enforcers in Lambayong, Sultan Kudarat at around midnight Thursday. This was considered as lethal force because the victims was just shoot out because they refused only to pull out. Therefore, if the police are allowed to use lethal force, how sure are you that they didn't overpower the authority they have?
For that case, there is a law that we need to follow and we have individual rights. So even a suspect have the right. So if the police commit mistake, they will have to face the consequence. But the cases you mentioned is seldom happen, and it is not enough reason not to allow the use of lethal force. And how can you say that violent perpetrators surrender without using lethal force?
Instead of lethal force,
instead of using lethal force to the violent perpetrator to surrender, what if we are going to enhance the capability of the police officer and other law enforcers to address on how to engage or handle violent perpetrators? Like for instance, in the case of Manila Stage Crisis, where Philippine officials, police, and law enforcers accused that they have a poor handling on the situation caused the 8 hostages' death. The reason was the involvement of the lethal force and deadly weapon because two parties, perpetrator and the police officers. In addition, this involvement of lethal force can trigger the perpetrator to commit another offense on the said hostage incident. And what if we apply the more negotiation strategy in peaceful manner in exchange for their safety?
Lethal force should be used because we have no assurance that the perpetrator will surrender properly. For example, the terrorist group, can you assure that they will surrender to the police with just the warrant of arrest? That's why lethal force should be used to the police.
Assured, the terrorist CBP and PND surrendered to the police without lethal force? Correct. Yes, there is an assurance and a chance that they surrendered to the police without lethal force. Like for instance, the 10 NPA rebels surrendered recently to the National Capital Region Police Office. Here, there are no violence involved. The police officers have been only open in finding ways for diplomatic and peaceful resolution strategy towards ending any form of conflict that may trigger violence to the CBP and PA indeed. I am sure that by using lethal force make the perpetrator or the terrorist group to surrender if we have this diplomatic and peaceful resolution during the police.
Yes, by using lethal force, make the perpetrator or the terrorist group to surrender. That's why lethal force should be allowed. That's why the PNP established a special unit to do operation. For example, the Special Action Force. This group is mobile strike force. Our reaction unit augment regional, provincial, municipal, and city police for civil disturbance control. This group established because there are dangerous groups need to use lethal weapons for them to surrender.
The underlying moral justification and moral responsibility in play in the use of lethal force by police officers. On the hand, police use lethal force morally justified in part by fundamental natural moral rights and obligations, especially the right of personal self-defense and moral obligation to defend lives of innocents. If one can do so without risking own life. On the other hand, the moral justification of police use lethal force is to some extent role specific. Police officers morally duty to put themselves in harm's way to protect others. However, police under some circumstances eventually have an institutionally based moral duty to use lethal force to uphold the law, to use lethal force to win conflict or wars.
Overall, we conclude that lethal force should not be used by the police because it only degraded the rights of a person based in the Bill of Rights. Moreover, the use of lethal force can affect the trust of the public to the law enforcers. In this case, lethal force is not acceptable. Hence, the duty of the police officer is to simply preserve peace and order and prevent crime.